Hi everyone. So today we're talking about the science fair and getting started on that. This video, you don't need to take notes, but you will have to answer some questions in the Google form that's attached to this assignment. And as you're going through, I just want you to think about what's standing out to you, what interests you most, because the goal of this year's science fair is to actually be working on something that we're really interested in. All right, so this year's science fair. This is a project where you are going to be acting like a real scientist. You're going to be learning about something that you are interested in, and then at the end of the year, you're going to share your learning. So a key difference, if you were here last year versus this year, is that this year you actually get to choose your topic a little bit more than you did last year. So you're going to brainstorm in this next class. You're going to spend a lot of time brainstorming a bunch of different ideas, and then I'll help you figure out which one of those ideas is the best fit for you and for this science fair. You can work independently on this if you'd like, or you can work with one partner. We won't have any groups bigger than two, just because of the amount of work that takes, and also because of in remote, I think it's harder to work with more than one partner. The science fair itself will take place towards the end of the year instead of, I think it was February last year. This year it'll probably be May or around then. And so what that means is that we're going to be working on this throughout the year, but usually just one day per week. Okay, so as you are brainstorming your project, there's three different buckets, basically. Three different types of projects that you could do. The first one, which is what most people will probably end up doing, is an experimental or observational study. The second one is an action project, and then the third one is a research project, and I'll talk a little bit more about each of those. All right, so in the experimental or observational study, this is what we typically, what we did last year for the most part, is you start with a question, you have a hypothesis about that question, and then you do an experiment or take data on observations to learn more about that and to either prove or disprove your hypothesis. So there's a lot of research involved here, and then a design of an experiment or some observations, and then you have to collect data. And the end product of this is a presentation about your work and your research. So an example that I put in here is starting with the question, how does spring temperature affect how quickly plants start growing leaves? And the hypothesis for that might be if the spring temperature is warmer, then new leaves will come faster because plants need warmth to grow. Then I would spend some time researching about that, using the internet to kind of back up my hypothesis or maybe adjust my hypothesis a bit. And then I would set up a way of collecting data. So for this one, it sounds like I would probably have to go outside and take the temperature daily for a little while and make observations about how plants are growing leaves. And because we'll only have one spring to work on this, obviously, this would be an observational study because we can't actually experiment with how to change the spring temperature. Okay, some other examples of experimental and observational studies are how do worms affect the speed of decomposing in a container? How do different fertilizers affect plant growth? How does the weather affect people's moods? And I'll just leave the rest of those up there for a minute. You can read them yourself. Okay, so this is not at all the limit of the possibilities of experimental and observational studies. I would encourage you to think of some of your own questions that you might be interested in answering, but these are just some examples. All right, so the second type of project would be an action project. So this is when you start with some kind of community or world problem that you have seen and that you feel is important, and then an idea about how we can use science to start to fix the problem. So the key here is that this is a science fair project, so it's important that you're linking this somehow to science. So one article that I read this summer that is a community problem is the removal of trees in Roxbury to make room for a highway. So this is in a part of Boston that doesn't have a ton of trees, but there's this long strip of really old trees, which provide shade and a bunch of other important values to this neighborhood. And there's a proposal to cut down some of that to make way for a new road. And so one idea that I had about how we can use science to start to fix this problem is to figure out why are these trees valuable to this neighborhood, and to educate people about that. So this might, in this case, the educating of people might be like educating legislators. So maybe you're making a YouTube video, or you're asking people to write letters about this. Okay, and then that continues with research, making a plan, executing the plan. So in this example, I'm thinking of creating a public information campaign about how trees impact urban air quality and quality of life. And then I'm asking people that I know to call legislators to ask them to stop this or change this plan. So the end product for this one is a presentation about your research and your action. Some other examples of action projects would be volunteering with a tree planting campaign, and I might connect that to climate change. Designing a compost system for CCSC. Those of you who have been at CCSC in person know that we waste a lot of food. How can we not just be sending that to landfills? And that, again, could be connected to climate change. I guess a lot of these are connected to climate change. Organizing to decrease waste in Cambridge, a public education campaign about coronavirus, or growing a community garden. Those are some examples, and there's a ton more examples of how you could link science to an action. All right, and the final type of project would be a research project. This starts with an interest in a specific topic that we don't have the means to experiment on. So I think some of you are really interested in space, and there's not really, we just don't have the resources to do any experimental research on space. And so, like us personally, obviously, there are astronomers out there that are doing stuff. But so one example I had is the composition of each planet in the solar system. So this type of project, you would just be doing a lot of research, and depending on the topic, you might be able to do an interview with an expert to add to that bulk of research. The end product of this is two parts, because a research project is actually much easier than the action or experimental study to begin with. So I wanted to add a little bit more challenge here. So the end product of this is two parts. You have to do the typical science fair presentation, like in the other ones, but you also have to make a lesson about your topic that you then teach to other students. All right, so that's it. Go ahead back to the assignment, fill out the Google form. I want you to start thinking about what topics you're interested in. And then we will spend our class time doing some more brainstorming. I'll see you then.